Hello, all.
Yeah, hey, everybody.
This is going to be really fun. We're talking protecting your pennies.
Yes, and for those of you that aren't aware, or actually, I'm assuming all of you are aware, you've probably actually seen Gusto's little mascot that we call Penny. I think it's actually personally interesting just because it's so analogous to what we do here, Gusto Next, accountants, etc. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. I don't presume to actually be engaging or energetic speaker or anything like that. So I always like to start my talks off with this thing that I call last slide first. And the idea behind this is that in case you forget nothing else or anything else, that we actually talk about, you actually at least remember this. And if I bore you to tears, then you could at least have this as a reference. And just really quickly, it's just actually kind of set the theme what we're talking about. And it's like, yeah, we know that attacks are increasing and attackers themselves are actually getting more savvy. We also know that we just have a wider, what we call attack surface, meaning things that an attacker could actually latch on to, steal from, etc. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the attack surfaces. We're also going to talk about who are these people coming after you, your clients, and their money. And so a couple of other things I wanted to introduce you to is a practice that we have inside of Gusto when we actually want to give people feedback and suggestions. This thing we actually call a do, try, consider framework. Do meaning that we don't even want you to think about it. Just go and execute it. It's non-controversial. Try meaning that, hey, you might have to actually figure this out for yourself and right-size it for you, your business, and your team. And consider is hey, this is a little bit more advanced. It might be nuanced, and you might not even be able to actually do this at all. So this is the time to actually take screenshots or whatever you actually would like to do so we can actually get our talk on the road.
Did everybody get their screenshots? It's the most important one, but we promise it will show back up again. So why the heck are we here? Because the more that we become connected, the more we need to be very conscious of cybersecurity. Contacts, emails, passwords, location data, confidential documents, photos, etc. are all contained on our computers and our mobile devices. And so they are prime targets for malicious hackers. So the Identity Theft Resource Center reported in their annual report that breaches were up 69% in 2021 versus 2022. And according to PwC, accounting and financial firms have a 30% higher risk of suffering a cybersecurity attack. You want to know why accounting firms have such a higher risk?
Yeah, I think this actually is interesting because actually, by a show of hands, how many people here as accountants consider your business extremely exciting and attractive? Come on, it is. It's exciting. Be engaged. You're here, etc. But so when you think about old Flea, so at one point Flea was considered one of those malicious hackers. Accountants have very attractive assets. Yeah, live editing here. But in particular, accountants possess a lot of very valuable, sensitive information, and it paints a giant target on your back. So there are things that you have, both for yourself, for your employees, and your clients that are really valuable for a hacker. So one thing I think we all actually identify with is this notion of personally identifiable information, PII.
Yes, Social Security numbers, EINs. We all have those.
Yep, exactly. And as an attacker, that is great because it makes it easier for me to then impersonate you or to impersonate somebody else. And that's an extremely valuable thing as an attacker. One of the other things that is actually really attractive for an attacker is the fact that as an accountant, you're probably dealing with a lot of payment information, and that includes credit cards, which
banking.
Yes, banking.
Checks with a K, not a Q.
The other thing is also is interesting that people kind of forget about is that accountants and accounting firms also have money transfer capabilities. Now, this might sound really boring, but as an attacker, especially an attacker that may be in a sanctioned country such as North Korea or Russia, I now have the ability, after compromising your account and your ability to do money transfers, now I can launder money. And that is more valuable to a nation state, especially somebody that's embargoed like North Korea, than even just the dollar you have in your bank account. My ability to say, hey, I can now take my $1 million of bad assets and clean it through this nice, shiny, happy, pristine, good accounting firm is deeply useful to me as an attacker. And then finally, one of the other big things that you have are credentials. And as an attacker, getting a hold of your credentials allows an attacker to do several things. One is just chaos and mischief, but the other is to be able to actually then send legitimate messages from your firm to your clients. And if your firm sends your clients a request to say, hey, authorize this, or hey, send money here, since your clients trust you so deeply and the attacker has now stolen your credentials, they're going to do what the attacker has asked for.
Steal things.
Yes.
Now, what are some of these threats?
Yeah. So when we actually start thinking about attackers, like one of the very first ones I think about is what we call script kiddies. And this is kind of like just general internet thugs and miscreants. And one way I like to actually characterize them is just consider them almost like internet graffiti artists.
Or baby hackers.
Did you say baby hackers?
Baby hackers.
Look, we don't like to say that we're baby hackers, okay? We're just hackers on the upswing. But, part of the interesting thing about these script kiddies is it's just purely crimes of opportunity. This is like somebody smashing your window because you're parked, in an alley or something along that. But that's not the only threat actor that we actually think about. One of the others, which is pretty obvious, is organized crime. Organized crime, the name is literally in it, is like criminals who are very organized. These are actual professionals. They clock in, they clock out, they have managers, they have CEOs, they have business models. Everything about them is organized just like any other high-performing team and company that you would like to see, except they're evil.
And they want to launder money.
Yeah, and they want to launder money. One other that people also forget about are insiders, and this idea of insider threat. Now, for some of you that actually have been deep in the banking world, et cetera, which I'm assuming is a lot of you, you've probably already had like insider threat training, but a lot of people have this picture of insider threat of just being like some angry employee or something like that. That definitely is a scenario. However, we also like to consider insider threat to just be unwitting employees. So somebody that has been fooled into actually doing something negative, or somebody,
like writing their password on a Post-it note and leaving it on their computer while they go to the bathroom.
Yes. And all of those things kind of lead to this population of people that are interested in what accountants have. Now, we've talked a little bit about that, but it's actually probably also worth us talking about, what we're going to talk about. This whole idea of us actually trying to get you a basic understanding of malware, ransomware, and phishing attacks. And ideally, you don't come away
Going too fast.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Accounting friends, I know all of these cybersecurity threats stress you out, right? Who here does not get stressed out when we say cybersecurity? Really? Only one person does not get stressed out? I think Flea's the only one here who doesn't get stressed out. He enjoys this stuff. But not to worry. We're going to cover a few things today. We got your back.
Yeah.
Now you can tell them what we're talking about.
Yes. As I mentioned, we want to talk about malware, which I think some of you, already a little bit familiar with. It's essentially just these uninvited programs that are actually running on your computer. We're also going to talk about phishing, which is a form of social engineering that impacts people from an email standpoint.
Don't define them all now.
Yes. And then finally, ransomware, which Niall is actually going to give us a lot of insight about how these things actually work, what they are, and how it perpetuates inside of your infrastructure.
So what we're going to do is define them, give you a little stats and facts, and then the techie here is going to talk about what to do, try, and consider in order to protect your firms. So does everybody have their pen and papers ready? Or your remarkables? Okay, so malware is where we're starting. And this is software that is specifically designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to your computer systems. And just a statistic here, during the first half of 2022, there were 2.8 billion attacks worldwide. That's a lot, right? Now, daily, there are 560,000 pieces of malware detected every single day. And there are more than 1 billion malware programs out there. That's a lot that we need to consider, that we need to protect ourselves from. So, Flea, tell us what we need to do to protect.
When we think about how to protect yourselves from malware, one of the very first things is pretty basic, which is enable your antivirus that's on your system. Most modern operating systems come with some form of malware detection and prevention. The other thing that I always try to remind people of is just be very suspicious of hyperlinks. You know, the things you actually click on in email or just on the website, et cetera, just the things that you actually are downloading to make sure that it actually is legitimate. The other thing that you can do today is to make sure that your local firewall that's on your laptop or on your desktop computer is also enabled, and that helps prevent the malware from communicating back out. Now, those basics, we want to actually take that a little bit further. And some things I encourage people to actually do is to try looking into something that we actually call MDR, this whole idea of managed detection and response. Essentially getting a bunch of nerds like myself and my team to just sit in the background looking to make sure that all the things coming in and out of your network are appropriate. It's also would behoove you to actually educate yourself. You're actually doing some of that today. You should probably actually go much, much further about how to actually recognize some of these. Now, when we actually start thinking about things get a lot more advanced, we wanted you to consider this idea of just straight up actually restricting some of your company devices and having this notion of pre-approved known software that should be running inside of your corporation. Essentially what we're saying is, hey, you know what tools your business needs to run, so just make sure those are the only tools your business is running. The other thing you can do, depending on the sophistication of your office and your network, is to consider generally just blocking network traffic from known bad addresses. It turns out that attackers are cheap, and that means that they also are looking for economies of scale, and so they generally are using the same networks to attack people from. And if you can block those, you generally are actually making the attack itself inert. And then finally, the last one, which is a little bit advanced, and it goes more into, nerd land, is this idea of actually installing network security monitoring tools, so you can actually just on the fly detect suspicious activity, because most malware has some known things that we in the industry can actually identify and say, hey, this is unusual. Maybe this program should not be communicating to this random computer in North Korea.
All right, phishing. We've heard of this before, right? It is the fraudulent practice of sending emails claiming to be from reputable companies in order to really entice you individuals to reveal some personal information, things like passwords and credit card numbers. And this is the most common type of attack. They can be quite sophisticated. So there are 3.4 billion phishing emails sent out every single day across the world, according to earthweb.com. And then last year, Kaspersky detected nearly 3.5 million malicious attacks on mobile devices. These are called smishing. So not only is this a threat on your computers, but it's also a threat on your mobile devices. Now, spear phishing is even more dangerous because the attacker has taken some time to actually learn about who you are and your habits. They may send an email saying something that may hit home, close to home, that's very personal to you. They may even send that email as someone you know. And these type of attacks are sophisticated because they take their time to get to know you by looking at information you're publishing every single day on sites such as social media, right? So you have to be careful about the data that you are publishing online. So many of you have probably posted that you're here at Gusto Next and in Denver. So that is personal information that someone may be able to use against you in a phishing email one day.
Oh, I love it when people just give out free information.
I
It's
know.
It's great
fun,
because
right?
it's like me as a baby hacker, I can take a look at that and I can say Niall is in Denver. I'm going to send her a message and say, hey, I'm your cousin that you never met before. Let's go get dinner and et cetera. And because I know this information, it makes it more likely for her to actually respond to it. However, there are ways to actually protect yourself. One of the simplest is something we actually have today, like in most platforms. Enable enable two-factor authentication across all sensitive systems where you can. The other big thing is that you just scrutinize. The great thing is that y'all are accountants. You already know how to scrutinize things. And now we're just asking you to apply extra scrutiny to email messages or text messages or voicemails, in particular when there's implied urgency, and even more so when there's implied urgency around money. And then finally, once again, train yourself. The more you know, the more you know. I guess knowing is half the battle for those of you that are like, Gen X.
Now, did you know that two-factor authentication can be enabled within your Gusto account? Not only on Gusto Pro, and if you didn't know, see the green Gusto in there? That's how you know you're in Gusto Pro, but also in your clients' accounts as well. So if you haven't already set that up, go do so. It's under settings. Back to you, Philippe.
Yes, that is a very good do. The other things on the try side, though, is a lot of email providers, in particular if you use something like Gmail / Google Suite, or if you like Office 365, they actually have phishing and spam detection and capabilities built into them. They're not the most sophisticated, but they're actually very useful. And it's something that effectively you already are paying for / get for free. So if you can, turn it on. The other is encourage your employees, coworkers, and even clients to start getting trained on cybersecurity, and in particular, how to actually recognize phishing attacks. Now, on the consider side, some of the things that are a little bit more advanced is installing this thing that we call an email gateway. This is actually something that is looking at the email as it comes in and goes out to try to determine, hey, is this fraudulent and things like that. There are actually some great customers that actually produce email security gateways. So here at Gusto, we use a company called Material Security. They're a customer as well. And that's what we use as part of our email gateway protections. The other is to actually enable advanced protection on your email provider. So for example, if you use Google / G Suite, there's this thing called Google Advanced Protection. It has been so effective that on the campus of Google, they have effectively eliminated the risk of phishing. And this is something that is actually a capability of everybody here. And I promise you, it's actually pretty straightforward and easy. And then finally, make security training mandatory. Hey, we make people go through anti-money laundering training, financial wellness training, all these other kind of things.
People advisory training?
Yeah, I don't know any of these accounting things. I'm just a nerd. But I'm sure there's other stuff that accountants do that this is actually very similar towards. And if you can actually get all of your employees to take this training, it won't eliminate phishing per se, but it will dramatically reduce it and overall provide you better protection for yourself and for your clients.
Now, this leads to ransomware. This is a type of malicious software designed to block you from your computer system until you pay some money. Now, I like numbers, right? In the first 6 months of 2021, there was $590 million paid out in ransomware-related activity, according to FinCEN. And in 2020, it was only $416 million. So you see how that cost is rising?
Inflation.
Inflation, okay, yes. Now, the average ransom paid by organizations that were victims of quote-unquote successful ransomware attacks, where their data was encrypted and then returned because they paid, increased nearly fivefold to $812,360. So does anyone in here have an extra $812,000 that they could let me borrow? No?
Clearly, we
okay.
gotta switch business models.
Yeah, so sorry. Okay, give us our do's and don'ts.
Yeah. So this one is actually great because obviously tons of you actually heard in the news about all these ransomware attacks, like some of the major energy providers being taken down, hospitals being taken down, et cetera. One of the best things you can do to help protect yourself from a ransomware attack, super simple, and you should be doing it anyway. Have backups. Because if your data is in another location backed up and unencrypted, you can at least restore it and get back to an operational stance. We have this saying, and shout out for other people in the military, in law enforcement, et cetera, but you probably have heard this before, this whole idea of 2 is 1, 1 is none. So if you only have one copy, you actually don't really have a copy. That's not worth anything. You need to have 2 copies of something for it to actually be stable, and you'd actually have some security and assurance in the validity of that data. The other, which is also very straightforward that you should be doing anyway, is to always update your machines and software to the latest versions. Most companies now are very aware, and some of them are even regulated, so they're constantly pushing out software improvements to actually address some of these security vulnerabilities. Now, when we actually think about try, one of the other things I always like to add to people when they start thinking about backups is it's not enough to just have a backup. It's great, so that is a good start. Please go and make a backup, but also test your backup. Backups do have errors. They do fail. For some of you that are Gen X and maybe a little bit more experienced in your career, you think about like our old tapes that we used to have actually backups, et cetera. Those things go bad. CDs can get cracked. Hard drives can have toddlers spill Coke on them. All these other kind of things can make it a little bit more difficult for you to actually recover from a ransomware attack if that were to occur. And then finally, when we actually start thinking about some of the more advanced things on the consider, we can actually go to consider. When we actually start thinking about some of the things on the consider side, is to also take that backup strategy one other level forward, which is to also have those backups off-site. Now that off-site could also be a cloud backup along with a hard drive that you have. For some people who are super paranoid like me, I actually ship physical hard drives to other locations just in case something happens like a fire, flood, et cetera. I'm paranoid though, I'm a security kid. The other is to also think about engaging with some outside security firms to check your security posture, see if there are weaknesses to allow you to actually then patch those weaknesses, make ransomware much more difficult. And then there are other third parties you can also engage to essentially just have them on retainer in case the worst happens. These are people that can actually help you recover data, do forensics on the data that was lost and stolen, et cetera, so you can actually try to get back to a whole state.
So what we discussed here today is just the tip of the iceberg. So, as you know, cybersecurity is a must-do. And so the attackers are getting savvier by the minute. So Flea's gonna wrap us up, last slide last now, with our final do's, tries, and considers. And again, hopefully you took a picture of this slide when we started. Yeah. But just to reinforce.
Yep, just reinforcing it all. Anytime you see 2FA, just enable it. And if they have even more advanced things inside of there, enable that as well. Go out and also try to find and get some security consultation from pros. It turns out that a lot of security consulting firms are also customers. And if any of you have questions on reputable security firms, feel free to actually reach out to me or anybody else on the Gusto security team. Happy to actually share with you some of the great companies that are out there. The other thing we also try to get people to do is to get training. Make everybody trained inside of your company. Also, backup. 2 is 1, 1 is none. We encourage you to enable all of the advanced security protections that are available on your SaaS platforms, things like advanced protection inside of Google. And then on the consider side, something a little bit more complex is forcing all of your employees to have 2FA, because the more protected they are, the more protected you are, and the more protected your clients are as well. And yeah, then once again, I just want to give a shout out to security pros, because even though some of us may have come from black hat backgrounds, et cetera, most of us are very interested in helping, and we love talking to customers and clients and people in need of security help. Believe it or not, security people are perpetual optimists, and we want to see the world be a more secure place for you, your customers, your family, et cetera. Yeah.
Well, Flea, I think we did a good job.
Oh, yeah.
High five. Yeah. You all feel smarter about cybersecurity today now, don't you?
Yeah, I am so glad about that. And I would also like to, replicate some of the applause, in particular for some of our first responders, and some of our, Hyatt security professionals that are actually here, as well as some of our Gusto security professionals. We try to keep a low profile, but it's because we're here to protect you. We want to make sure that you have an enjoyable, engaging, but also distraction-free event. So thank all of you.
Everybody say thank you to Flea. Yeah.
No. The true thank you is when you're going to get my Oakleys bedazzled.
Oh, so sorry. We're going to work on those shoes first.
All right, everybody.